If you're thinking about buying a home this year, or maybe you just barely missed out on qualifying for a home loan, make sure you watch this video because starting today, July 1st, there's some brand new rules for how mortgages are qualified that might help you either qualify for a bigger mortgage or get a better rate. Coming up. Hey, what's up guys? My name's Keitan. I'm a loan officer from San Diego, California, and on this channel I help people just like you learn how to buy their first home and navigate the mortgage process. Now, if you're new here, make sure you hit that like button and hit subscribe, especially if you're interested in content to help you buy your first home this year. And as always, timestamps for anything that I mentioned in the video will be listed in the description below, along with links as well. Now that that's out of the way, let's jump right into it. All right, so starting today, July 1st, 2021, there is some big changes coming to the mortgage industry for the first time really since the housing reform after the 2008 crash. You see, after the financial crisis of 2008, the federal government stepped in and created some guidelines, a set of rules to help your everyday consumers be protected when getting a mortgage. And as a result, the CFPB created a set of guidelines known as the QM, or Qualified Mortgage Guidelines, that basically is a set of criteria for loans that will be eligible to be sold on the secondary market. Now, the central and probably most common part of the QM, or Qualified Mortgage Rule, was the debt-to-income ratio restriction of 43%. And this restriction was ultimately designed to make sure that borrowers were not getting in over their heads with debt and that lenders were properly qualifying people based on their ability to repay the mortgage. However, shortly after, the CFPB actually made an exception for both Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, both government-sponsored entities that were previously private actually, and they moved that debt-to-income restriction from 43 to 50% for them. However, this wasn't supposed to be a permanent change. This was eventually set to expire. And actually, the expiration date for the QM patch, as they would call it, was set to expire at the beginning of January of 2021. However, as we all know, coronavirus happened. When the pandemic hit, that changed a lot of things and derailed a lot of the CFPB and the federal government's plans. So ultimately, they ended up extending the QM patch from January 2021 all the way up to July of 2021. So after several meetings in December of 2020, the CFPB released their plan for what they were calling the General QM Final Rule, basically a resolution to figure out what to do with the QM rules after the QM patch had expired. You see, now that we're more than a decade removed from the crash of 2008, the federal government has a lot of time to really take a look at the data based on the rules that they made post-crash to see if they were really effective in preventing delinquencies, defaults, and obviously foreclosures for borrowers. And ultimately, what the CFPB has found over the years is that debt-to-income ratio, especially a hard cap of 43, isn't really a perfect indicator of someone's ability to repay a mortgage. In fact, they've found that default rates between people with higher debt-to-income and lower debt-to-income usually wasn't really much of a factor, including credit scores as well. What they actually found to be one of the bigger indicators for the ability to repay a mortgage actually had to do more with the rate that the borrower was given, as opposed to things like debt to income and credit score. So now with the new QM rule, they're actually saying that a mortgage will be a qualified mortgage under the new rule as long as the APR for that mortgage does not exceed the prime average rate of that day when the mortgage is originated by more than 1.5%. Now, this doesn't mean that the debt-to-income ratio guidelines are going away. In fact, it actually suggests and encourages lenders to continue to use things like debt-to-income, loan-to-value, and other kind of compensating factors when qualifying a borrower's ability to repay. It also encourages lenders to look at other factors beyond the typical income, assets, and credit to look at as compensating factors and kind of have more flexible guidelines as opposed to the hard and fast 43% rule. Now, what the General QM Final Rule does keep are some of the same guidelines in terms of what you can charge a borrower as a lender as far as points, fees, and things of that nature. So we want to make sure that we're obviously still qualifying people based on their ability to repay, but also not overcharging them for using a quote-unquote more risky product. In addition to more of a price-based guideline for the QM rule, they also offer a second option for those that don't really meet that first criteria. So effectively, any loans that are originated by a servicer or a lender and are held for 36 months can be considered what they're calling a seasoned QM loan, as long as there's no history of any defaults, missed payments, or anything within that first 36 months. Once again, this goes back to the focus of the new QM rule, which isn't really based on debt to income or anything like that, but more really focused on real life versions of people's ability to repay a mortgage. Alrighty, well, enough jargon. What does this mean for you as a consumer? Well, first of all, by removing that hard and fast 43% rule and also removing Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac's little exception of 50%, it levels the playing field for more mortgage companies to offer a wider range range of programs. You see, there's a lot of companies that offer their own portfolio programs that closely mimic conventional guidelines with a few exceptions, but because of that 43% threshold, they're not able to sell these as QM or qualified mortgages. This opens up a different avenue for qualifying borrowers, not just a hard and fast debt to income ratio, but also, like I've mentioned before on this channel, residual income, which I personally believe is a way better indicator of someone's ability to repay. For example, somebody who makes $5,000 a month gross versus somebody who makes $50,000 a month gross, if they're both making about 43% DTI, the person who makes $5,000 a month is left with less after taxes and after their take home than the person who's making $50,000. But they're still subject right now to those same rules. So with the new QM rule, this would kind of level the playing field and allow people to really kind of push their boundaries of what they can qualify for with a much more real world kind of qualification. Also, a big plus for consumers is because the new QM rule is focused on price, this is going to kind of also force some of those lenders that are choosing to be higher priced because they're only having to focus on the 43% debt to income ratio. This is going to force them to kind of have to lower their rate sheet a little bit, which ultimately means more competition, and therefore as a consumer, you're going to get better rates from mortgage companies as well, because they're going to want to make sure that their mortgages are meeting the QM rule. You see, as it stands right now, some of these non-QM or non-agency types of loans, the non-traditional ones, I'm talking like 12, 24-month bank statement type programs, those types of things, those aren't really able to be sold as QM loans because of the underwriting guidelines, because of the fee restrictions, and also because of the fact that they have to stick to that 43% DTI. It makes more sense for them to kind of push those boundaries a little bit more. But now without that restriction for debt to income ratio and really focusing on price, some of these non-QM lenders will probably be incentivized to kind of lower their rate sheets on these in order to make more profit by selling it into the secondary market as a qualified mortgage. Now, this does not mean that debt to income ratio will not be a factor in underwriting your mortgage loan. I'm seeing a lot of people, real estate agents and mortgage professionals included, saying that the end of the QM rule means we're just going to go back to, stated income, stated assets, and it's going to be the Wild West all over again. It's not. But what this does mean is that lenders are going to have more flexible abilities and guidelines in order to get you qualified. Now, that doesn't mean that immediately starting on July 1st, that Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac are going to open up the floodgates and are going to change everything. In fact, I imagine that Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac will actually become a little bit more conservative, kind of keeping more or less the same guidelines as far as debt to income ratio is concerned, but they may open up some more compensating factors for things like residual income. So those changes are coming. I don't expect to see them at least for another year or two though. Another big takeaway from this is that this might open up the playing field for things like non-warrantable condos, jumbo programs as well, to be sold as QM mortgages. So look forward to seeing those products kind of be offered with much lower rates as well. But ultimately, time will tell, right? I have no idea what this is actually going to do to the market, but I am predicting, based on what I'm hearing from the industry, we're going to see a whole slew of new products with lower rates, more flexible guidelines for borrowers as we come out of this. And given the state of the housing market right now, with prices continuing to go up, with inflation continuing to go up, I think it makes sense that we should have more flexible underwriting guidelines, because the ability to repay and affordability kind of go hand in hand. So you want to be able to get people into homes who can realistically afford it without being ultimately too restrictive. Now, we want to be safe and we want to make sure that we're making good decisions when we're qualifying borrowers, that we're not going back to, like I said, the stated era, but we want to make sure that we're being flexible and using common sense underwriting as well. But anyways, I want to hear what your guys' thoughts are, especially if you're a mortgage or real estate professional. How do you think this is going to impact our industry? What changes are you going to see from different lenders coming now that the QM rule has changed? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comment section down below. And once again, thank you guys for stopping by the channel. If you learned something new, hit that like button, hit subscribe. Here's a few more videos for you guys to watch. But until next time, see ya.